Our founders wrestled with this issue over 200 years ago. They knew that by vesting, they could have vested all power in the executive branch, thereby achieving secrecy, and flexibility. They chose not to. But the advocates of presidential power keep pretending that they did. And we're told that we would be best off if the executive branch could make all the decisions with secrecy and flexibility, and that would be, and we should trust that because, well, our men and women in uniform and the Pentagon in general will be careful, or that Congress can exercise oversight and consultation. That's not what the Constitution provides. It vests in Congress not only the power to declare war, but control over the money that funds military operations. It also makes the President Commander-in-Chief. So how do we wrestle with those competing constitutional provisions? President Jefferson did, and he's far more familiar with the Constitution than any of us. Americans had been attacked in the Mediterranean by the Bay of Tripoli. Not our allies attacked, not civilians of another country attacked. American ships were attacked. And before sending our naval forces, basically most of the military power of the United States, the Mediterranean, to the shores of Tripoli, he sought congressional authorization, which was provided on February 2nd, 1802. The advocates of unlimited executive power without the need for congressional authorization, I'm willing to do that as soon as we elect a president who is wiser than Jefferson. So in 1973, we passed the War Powers Resolution, known as the War Powers Act, that allows the president to do pretty much what he or she wants for 60 to 90 days, but does provide real restrictions. Since then, president after every president has said that they don't recognize the binding power of the AUMF, but they'll often act consistent with it. The most recent clear violation, because our attacks on ISIS may be authorized by the 2001 AUMF, but was not authorized by an AUMF, was our many months of operations against Gaddafi. Gaddafi wasn't associated with Saddam Hussein or al-Qaeda, we were told at that time that as a substitute for congressional authorization, maybe there'd be a UN resolution or NATO or a coalition of the willing. The fact is that at least in that circumstance, the President and others have as well, simply violated the War Powers Act. What we did, though, in 2011, at least in the House of Representatives, is provide a way to enforce the War Powers Act. Because although the War Powers Act is argued by some to violate the constitutional right to be Commander-in-Chief, no one doubts Congress's right to control what happens to appropriated funds. And so in 2011, I proposed an amendment, failed the first time, finally got it passed, to say that no fund shall be spent in contravention of the War Powers Act. And that has been part of the base bill for defense appropriations ever since, as it will be this year. We don't need to pass a new AUMF to show the world we support our troops. We provide funds for them and support them in so many other ways. But repeal now, replace later doesn't work for health care. I don't know if it will work here, but I know I'm very much opposed to it in health care. And while I think the General has argued that specificity is the opposite of flexibility, I would point out that vague authorization, a blank check, if you will, is the opposite of democracy. My question for all three panelists is, would you advise a president that the War Powers Act is not binding and constitutionally binding on the president, or is it the law of the land that the president must adhere to? Could I get a one-word answer from each? Mr. Olson.
My experience, Mr. Sherman, is similar to yours, which is that at least within the Obama administration, where I was most familiar with,
I need a one-word answer. I've got limited. I'll go on to the General.
Right, that it was considered to be something that the administration complied with.
something they'll comply with because it's convenient or something that's legally binding? General, why don't you answer?
Sir, I'm not a constitutional expert.
Okay, I'll go to the judge.
I give the same answer that every Attorney General since Jimmy Carter's Attorney General gave, which is yes.
Yes, it is binding.
No, yes, it is unconstitutional.
Yes, it is. Okay, I'll follow that up with one quick question. Can Congress legally provide that monies provided by the Defense Appropriations Bill cannot be spent in contravention of that act?
Sure.
So that's the way to enforce it. I'll yield back.
That's a way.
Chair recognizes the gentleman.